Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my spoiler talk for The Walking Dead, the final season. That's a spoiler warning. This entire video is going to be chock full of spoilers, so if you haven't played the game and you don't want it spoiled, well then don't watch this video. If you want to hear them anyways, go for it. So I'm just going to start out with one of my favorite things, which was a callback to the first game, and I just kind of loved this moment. AJ and Clem follow an individual to a barn, and AJ is sitting there hunched over a salt lick, and he asks you what it is, and Clem tells him that it's a salt lick, and you basically can tell him not to lick it because it doesn't taste good. And if you tell him not to, he immediately asks Clem if she has ever tasted one, and her immediate response is, I don't know. Which, I mean, if you've played the original, you know that joke, because that's exactly what she told Lee when she licked one at the farm. I just loved that. I thought it was a hilarious callback, and it gave me a good chuckle. Now, as far as real deep spoilers, I gotta say, this game is really interesting in that your decisions really affect AJ. In the original game, you felt like as Lee, you were really taking care of Clementine, but it wasn't necessarily the same as raising her. Obviously, Lee was, but it didn't feel as genuine in that game as it does in this game. Clementine's actions and what she tells AJ really do affect him, and they can affect the outcome of the game. In fact, they can even alter who is alive and who is dead at the end. And it's really interesting to witness his change throughout, because there's a point in the game where he'll straight up throw some of the things you've done back in your face. One of the things he threw in my face was the fact that I told him not to be a murderer, yet I found killing of certain people very easy. Specifically, I killed a guy named Abel, but that was because he begged me to as an act of mercy so that when he died, he wouldn't become a walker. But it is really interesting to see AJ's reaction to that, as well as my other actions, and how that affects the rest of the game. I even went back and replayed the final chapter because what I had told him the first time around led to somebody being dead that I wanted to live. Specifically, it was Violet. And speaking of Violet, her and Lewis are two new characters, and they can be straight platonic friends for Clementine, or if you would like to, you can actually romance them. And I will say that it's not as in-depth of a romance as it could be, but as I am an individual who likes females, I generally, whether I'm playing a male or a female character, I pursue female romances. So I pursued a romance with Violet, but I am aware that you can pursue one with Lewis. And I really liked that because, quite frankly, it adds another layer to the game. While you could sort of pursue something romantic in previous games, it never really went anywhere, not like it does in this game. And as you can guess now, there is a reason I replayed the final chapter to make sure Violet survived, because I had made her Clementine's girlfriend. But I like that not just because there is a romance angle, but because you feel more fulfilled for Clementine by doing that, or at least I did, because this is the conclusion of her story. And quite frankly, if it was going to be her last game, I wanted her to be happy. But let's get into the complications I mentioned in my review, which are a group of raiders that aren't really raiders. A group shows up, and they basically show up to kidnap as many of the kids as they can because they raise them as soldiers and use them as soldiers to fight in a war. And there is some obvious, very major commentary in there that humans, no matter what, will go to war, even in a time when there's more walkers than humans. What makes this entire situation even worse is that Lily shows up, and if you don't remember who Lily is, Lily was a character in the first game who was really kind of a piece of shit, and it didn't help that her father raised her, who was a complete piece of shit as well. But Lily, you had the choice of bringing her along and she would eventually kind of bail on the team, or you could just leave her behind because she murders Carly. So that's kind of a brief Lily breakdown, but she shows up, she is part of this group, and she remembers Clementine. And it honestly leads to some great moments between the two, and man, she is a vicious bitch. She is just the same piece of trash she was in the first game, and it's a thing to witness in this game. But she does eventually kidnap a bunch of the kids, and Clem has to go and rescue them with help from some of the other kids. It's a really great story, and it leads to a fantastic conclusion. It leads to this really great conversation between Lily and Clem while Lily is floating away in the river to try and escape. Well, it can be a great conversation. You can just shoot at Lily if you'd like to, but I really kind of wanted to have that conclusion of a conversation. Not to say that Lily didn't deserve to die, but at that point I was trying to set a new example for AJ, and so I talked to Lily instead, and I basically told her what a piece of garbage she was and that she'll always be alone, because just look at all the events that you and her have been through, and she winds up alone because she hates everyone else and she doesn't really care about anyone, so she can't ever really be in a group. But that leads me into the real end of the game with Ten and Minerva, and man, I gotta talk about them for a minute. Minerva, aka Minnie, was part of the group of kids, but she was actually given away to the Raiders in order to protect the others. And you find out while in the Raiders, her sister was never really happy and wanted to leave, so she convinced Minnie that they should leave. Basically, Minnie pretended she was gonna leave and then straight up murders her own sister. But then she talks about how she loves in the group and how she's happy in the group, and there's just this weird kind of imbalance there. Like, how could you love being in this group so much that you'd murder your own sister? You talk about wanting to protect the ones you love, but you murdered your own sister in order to prove your loyalty to this group. It just felt a little unbalanced and a little rushed. I would have liked to have known more about that situation just to work that out a bit better. But Minerva pops up at the very end. She's bitten, she's dying, and she leads a horde of walkers to you and the small group you have left that's trying to escape. And this is where Ten really just kind of ruins it again. Ten is one of the youngest in the group, and he's honestly kind of an idiot because he puts other people at risk constantly. He can get another character killed early on, well does, or at least did in my playthrough. And depending on the decisions you've made with AJ, he can actually get Violet killed. It was Violet in my case, it might be Lewis depending on your other decisions, but he can get your best friend / significant other killed. Or you can let AJ shoot him. That ends up being for the best because you know Ten isn't gonna learn, he isn't gonna grow. Throughout your interactions with him, you realize that he's kind of a moron, and he just hasn't caught on to how this world now functions. And it's sad that you have to go that far, but it is one of those things that I've said in the past, that The Walking Dead is about survival, not necessarily morality. And I've gotta say, out of all the new characters, he was probably my least favorite because he was clearly added just to be that problem that he is. And I feel like that's a little lazy, but overall it still worked very well. I'm really not going to go too in-depth into the ending, but I will say that it's got some tragedy, but it also ends in honestly a really fulfilling way for me anyways. I mean, it's not happy sunshine, puppies, and rainbows completely, but it's pretty damn close. And I will say, they do a good job of making you think it might not be a happy ending. Okay, since this is a spoiler video, I will ask you if you have played the final season of The Walking Dead and what you thought of it, so comment down below. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.